Imagine this. Behind the lace curtains of prim London parlours, behind every polite smile and carefully buttoned gown, lay a world no history book dared to describe. The Victorian era, the age of restraint, virtue, and moral order, was also the most secretly obsessed with desire. Men preached purity, while brothels thrived. Women were told to suppress emotion, yet fainted under the weight of their own corsets, yearning for air, for freedom, for touch. And beneath the gaslight glow of London's foggy streets, a shadow world was born. One where lust, repression, and hypocrisy ruled more powerfully than the Queen herself. Welcome to the dark secrets of sex in the Victorian era. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Maybe you're curled in bed, lights dimmed, or perhaps driving through a quiet road. Wherever you are, if you love stories that uncover what history tried to hide, don't forget to subscribe to Whispers of History. Because tonight, we not just exploring the past, we reopening the locked doors of a century that lived two lives, one moral, one forbidden. The Victorians were obsessed with appearances. To the outside world, England was a temple of morality, churches, family dinners, strict dress codes, and endless rules of decorum. But this was only the surface. Beneath the polished manners, there existed a culture of repression so suffocating that it created its own rebellion. The more people were told to hide desire, the more they sought it out. This paradox of purity and obsession defined the era. It's why the Victorians built the largest empire on earth while quietly building the world's first underground erotic economy. Let's start where this hypocrisy began, with Queen Victoria herself. She's remembered as the paragon of modesty, yet her letters to Prince Albert tell a different story, passionate, even lustful. "How intense is my happiness with you," she once wrote. "I never knew love until I knew you." Their marriage bed was anything but cold. Behind palace walls, they shared the same longing that the public was told to suppress. This royal contradiction trickled down through society. If the Queen could love fiercely but hide it, then every woman had to do the same. Love in secret, desire in silence. Doctors, meanwhile, became the moral gatekeepers of the body. In the mid-19th century, medical journals declared that female pleasure was unnatural and that women who sought it suffered from hysteria. The treatment, disturbingly ironic. Physicians performed pelvic massages under the guise of curing illness, a practice that led to the invention of the vibrator. What began as medical hypocrisy evolved into one of the strangest intersections of science and sexuality in history. But repression didn't just create strange medicine. It reshaped entire lives. Women were raised to be obedient wives, told that good women did not enjoy intimacy. Men, forbidden from showing affection, turned to London's shadow districts. By 1850, the city was home to nearly 50,000 prostitutes, some as young as 13. Brothels were everywhere, disguised behind tea houses, laundries, and ladies' clubs. A double standard ruled. Men sinned freely, women paid the price. And yet, despite all this secrecy, an undercurrent of rebellion ran through society. Pamphlets on sexual hygiene, underground literature like The Pearl, and even coded diaries from upper-class women revealed something remarkable, that women, too, were questioning the lies they'd been told. They wanted to know their own bodies, their own pleasure, their own power. But such curiosity could ruin reputations. So, they turned to secrecy, building a hidden sisterhood of knowledge passed quietly from woman to woman. When words were forbidden, Victorians learned to speak through gestures, fabrics, and glances. Every part of a woman's appearance became a code, a quiet rebellion against repression. The flick of a fan, the tilt of a parasol, the color of a ribbon, all spoke of longing, curiosity, and subtle defiance. In an era when even the mention of ankles could cause scandal, women became experts at saying everything without speaking at all. The language of fashion became the language of desire. Corsets tightened, sleeves narrowed, and necklines shifted, all to both conceal and reveal. These contradictions mirrored their society, restrained in form, yet pulsing with hidden energy beneath. The corset, once seen as a symbol of chastity, was also a symbol of control. It reshaped women's bodies to fit an ideal that men desired: tiny waists, curved hips, delicate fragility. But what the men didn't know was that for many women, the corset became a tool of sensual power. Tight lacing, an extreme form of corseting, produced fainting, flushed cheeks, and shallow breaths, sensations that blurred the line between pain and pleasure. The act of being laced in by another's hands, the slow tightening of fabric around the body, it was both erotic and suffocating. A silent metaphor for what it meant to be a woman in the Victorian world. Letters became another secret outlet. Because a woman's voice was not allowed to express passion, her ink did. Hidden in diaries and private correspondence, women wrote what they could never say aloud. Some letters between lovers were disguised as religious devotion. "I pray for you nightly," a woman might write, meaning something far less innocent. Others were encoded with symbols, initials, or poetry. Many of these notes have survived, tucked in drawers or between the pages of prayer books. Silent witnesses to the truth that women were far from the emotionless creatures society pretended they were. Behind closed doors, art, too, became an act of rebellion. The pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, artists like Dante Gabriel, Rossetti, and John Everett Millais, painted women in ways that scandalized polite society. Their muses weren't chaste angels. They were sensual, full-lipped, and alive. Their gazes met the viewers directly, unashamed, knowing. For women, these paintings were revelations. To see themselves represented not as saints or sinners, but as human, was revolutionary. Even the models who posed, often working-class women, gained quiet fame and independence from their role as fallen figures. It was art that turned shame into strength. But the most daring defiance took place in the drawing rooms of London's elite. Secret salons, gatherings of intellectual women, discussed what society refused to name. Feminists, poets, and reformers met under the pretense of literature or health, but their true subjects were marriage, anatomy, and pleasure. They read essays on female independence, often banned from publication. Women like Annie Besant and Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, both writers and reformers, openly challenged the hypocrisy of moral purity. They argued that denying women sexual knowledge was a form of control, a way to keep them submissive. In these circles, knowledge became liberation. Still, most women could not speak so freely. For them, rebellion lived in small acts, leaving a top button undone, wearing perfume too heavy for daytime, or daring to read novels like Madame Bovary in secret. These women were the quiet rebels of their age. They may not have burned flags or written manifestos, but they lived contradictions every day, loving within cages, desiring within silence. Their stories, often erased from history, tell us more about human resilience than any royal chronicle ever could. And yet, as we'll uncover in the next part, not all of Victorian society lived behind closed doors. Beneath the fog and cobblestone streets, a darker, wilder world thrived, one that mirrored every suppressed fantasy of the upper class. A world of brothels, pleasure houses, and secret clubs where the powerful came to shed their masks and indulge the very vices they condemned in public. The age of purity was also the age of its most elaborate sins. If you walked through London at midnight in the 1860s, you'd see a different empire. Gas lamps glowed through fog, horse hooves echoed on cobblestone, and under the shimmer of carriage lights moved a quiet army of women, thousands of them. Some were widows, others housemaids, others barely 16. They were called fallen women, but they hadn't fallen, they'd been pushed. Society denied them work, education, and property. Marriage was survival. Anything else was ruin. So, they survived the only way society allowed them to, by selling what society most desired, yet most condemned. Brothels flourished across the city, from the damp basements of Whitechapel to the perfumed mansions of Mayfair. Some catered to sailors and soldiers for a penny, others to dukes and politicians for fortunes. There were theatres of pleasure where the wealthy came disguised in masks, indulging in fantasies of power and submission. Behind heavy drapes, women performed roles that mocked the rigid morality outside, a servant punishing a lord, a duchess pretending to be a peasant. Everything that was forbidden in daylight was played out in the dark. But even in this underworld, women weren't merely victims. Some became madams, commanding entire establishments with sharp wit and silent authority. One of the most famous was Catherine Walters, known as Skittles, a courtesan who rose from poverty to become one of the most admired women in London. She rode horses in Hyde Park with such grace that men stopped mid-sentence just to watch her pass. Her beauty was matched by her discretion. She never spoke of her clients, and they rewarded her with jewels and estates. Yet beneath the luxury lay danger. A courtesan could rise high, but she could fall overnight. Age, scandal, or a whisper of disease could end everything. And yet, many of these women wielded more freedom than respectable wives. Married women, bound by law and expectation, could not own property or refuse their husbands. Courtesans, ironically, could. They earned, traveled, and chose their lovers. They were despised publicly but envied privately, symbols of forbidden independence. One could say that the brothel became an unintended refuge for female autonomy. In a society that denied women choice, some found it only in sin. It was a tragic, paradoxical kind of freedom. Meanwhile, the men who visited them led double lives. By day, they were lawyers, priests, politicians, moral leaders. By night, they shed their virtue and entered the shadows. Newspapers documented scandals that shocked the nation, like the Cleveland Street affair, where male brothels serving the elite were exposed. But most stories never reached print. The hypocrisy was protected, the women blamed. The law punished prostitutes, but not their clients. Even the Contagious Diseases Acts, introduced in the 1860s, targeted only women, forcing them into medical inspections for public health. It was a system that saw women's bodies as the battlefield for male sins. In the upper echelons, the secrets grew darker. Private clubs, like the Cannibal Club, gathered influential men, writers, scholars, aristocrats, to indulge in taboos. Behind scholarly discussions on anthropology, they explored sexuality in disturbing ways, using power and privilege as shields. Even literature became an outlet for these hidden obsessions. Works like The Pearl or My Secret Life circulated privately among the elite, explicit, anonymous, and raw accounts of what polite society refused to admit. For women, reading such texts was an act of defiance. Owning or even glimpsing them was considered corrupting. Yet many did secretly, curiously, because within those pages lay the truths they were never told. It revealed the gulf between their public virtue and private suffering, between the purity they were forced to display and the humanity they were forbidden to feel. In the next part, we'll move from the shadows back into the polished drawing rooms of respectability to the wives and daughters who looked perfect by day but lived quietly tortured lives by night. Because behind every well-dressed Victorian lady was a story of survival, of desire turned to secrecy, and passion turned to silence. By daylight, the women of Victorian England were perfect. Their hair pinned, their corsets drawn, their hands gloved. They smiled through dinner parties and sipped tea from china cups, all while the rules of their world pressed down like invisible chains. Marriage was the cornerstone of respectability, but inside those elegant homes, countless wives lived as prisoners. The law gave them no rights over their own bodies. A husband could demand, take, and own. Love was not required. Obedience was. And yet, Many of these women carried in their hearts a storm of longing that no sermon or social rule could quiet. In public, they were paragons of virtue. In private, many wrote in secret journals, the only place where their real voices lived. One such woman, Marian Evans, better known by her pen name George Eliot, broke convention not only by writing but by loving. She lived openly with a married man, scandalizing polite society, yet her novels, like Middlemarch, quietly exposed the suffocation of Victorian marriage, its moral rot beneath the lace. Through fiction, she said what thousands of women could not. "Women wish to be loved," she wrote, "not because they are pretty, but because they are themselves." But not every woman found her freedom through art. Many broke in silence. Doctors labeled them hysterical for suffering what we'd now call depression or trauma. Treatments were cruel: ice baths, isolation, or worse, asylum confinement. The world assumed the problem was women's minds, never the system that trapped them. Even medicine reflected the moral bias of the era. Female anatomy was barely studied, pleasure denied, emotion pathologized. A woman's pain was a medical inconvenience. And yet, behind the locked doors of clinics and bedrooms, rebellion was growing, quiet, invisible, unstoppable. In the late 19th century, a movement began that would change everything: the fight for female autonomy. Writers, reformers, and doctors like Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman to receive a medical degree, began challenging the myth that women were fragile or passionless. They argued that repression was killing women, not morally, but physically. Pamphlets circulated privately, teaching anatomy, contraception, and the right to say no. These ideas were whispered from woman to woman, crossing class lines, spreading through salons, sewing circles, even among servants. It was knowledge as rebellion, education as survival. The irony of it all: the very men who enforced chastity in their homes often sought passion elsewhere. The divide between respectable and fallen women blurred as mistresses, courtesans, and even actresses began shaping social influence. Figures like Lily Langtry, the mistress of the Prince of Wales, transformed scandal into celebrity. She became a fashion icon, a businesswoman, and a living symbol of women reclaiming control of their image. For the first time, public fascination with scandalous women outweighed moral condemnation. The Victorian mask was cracking, and through it, the modern woman was beginning to emerge. By the 1890s, whispers of change echoed across England. The new woman, educated, independent, unafraid to question, walked the streets once ruled by silence. She read novels about freedom, wore looser clothes, demanded suffrage. But the struggle wasn't over. Even as progress stirred, old prejudices lingered. Society still judged women by their purity, their marriage, their obedience. The double standards never vanished. They just grew subtler. Yet, within that struggle lay something powerful: the birth of female consciousness, the awakening of identity beyond servitude. And as the Victorian age faded into the 20th century, its secrets didn't die. They became our inheritance. The corset may have loosened, but the echoes of that repression remain. The idea that women must choose between virtue and desire, respectability and freedom, still haunts modern culture. Every woman who has ever been told to quiet her voice, hide her body, or suppress her feeling carries a fragment of the Victorian past. So, tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine those women, the courtesans and the queens, the wives and the rebels, breathing again through time. Their stories remind us that desire, even when silenced, never disappears. It hides, it adapts, it survives. And every generation of women, from the gaslit streets of London to the glow of your screen tonight, continues that same quiet rebellion. This was the dark secrets of sex in the Victorian era. You've been listening to Whispers of History, where the past still breathes, where every secret finds a voice. If this story kept you thinking, let me know in the comments which part of Victorian society shocked you the most. And if you'd like to uncover more forbidden truths from history, Don't forget to subscribe, because next time we'll open another door that history tried to keep locked.